should I?
Thanks for joining us this evening. Tonight we've got a wonderful presentation on the Art Deco murals of Hildreth Meière with author Kathleen Skolnick. My name is Scott Fortman, principal of the architecture firm of Gibbons, Fortman and Associates, and president of the Chicago chapter of the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. The Institute of Classical Architecture and Art is a leading national nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing the practice and appreciation of the classical and vernacular traditions in architecture and the allied arts. It's done primarily through education, publication, and our awards program. The organization is a valued educational resource for students, design professionals, and the public at large. The ICAA's focus is on traditional principles that are universal: proportion, balance, scale, beauty. Forms inspired by nature and the human body, incorporating handcrafted materials and art that results in thoughtfully designed spaces that feel comfortable, familiar, and inspirational. The desire for these principles is what draws us together to the ICAA and to events like this. Please visit our website at classicistchicago.org for more details on this and future events, and on the benefits of membership in the ICAA. If you don't remember the web address, just search ICAA Chicago. I'm delighted to once again co-host tonight's presentation with the Benjamin Marshall Society. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Stephen B. Moons. After attending Augustana College and DePaul University, Stephen had a successful career in real estate, including real estate law, residential appraisals, sales, development, and consulting. Steve is a contributing member of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation, a member of the Lake Forest Lake Bluff History Museum, Lake Forest Open Lands, and the Kahlo Foundation of Park Ridge. Originally from Lake Forest, he currently resides in the East Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago and is a member of the executive committee and lead docent and lecturer for the Benjamin Marshall Society. Steve, you want to take a moment?
Thank you. I am Stephen Mons. Normally at this point, you would get our president of the Benjamin Marshall Society, Jane LaPoe, but last minute schedule change has her on a plane to LA. So you have me. Just a few words about the Benjamin Marshall Society. I have been their docent and lecturer since the beginning, about 2004. The instigation was there was a really wonderful estate in Lake Bluff on 22 acres, Jens Jensen Gardens, and the house itself was by Benjamin Marshall. And Jane and her husband, Didier LaPoe, were the marketers for it as real estate brokers. They realized nobody knew who Benjamin Marshall was, even though he's all over and had been prolific in Chicago in particular. So the society started from that. I added in, for various reasons, I knew a lot about Benjamin Marshall already, and then just added to that knowledge. Through time, the lectures were the first thing we did to educate people and inform them what Benjamin Marshall's achievements were. As success grew, we had a beautiful book done, published by what was Acanthus Press, And we also have done a very nice film, which we do present usually with a lecture, webinar wise, or at programs other than on computer. And our website now, we are doing these webinars, which have been very successful on our own, and very fortunately to collaborate with ICAA. We will have some upcoming events. There'll be a couple lectures. We are planning an event at the Cuneo estate, which is actually in Vernon Hills now. I know it from being in Libertyville. They changed the borders. But we're going to do a program there in the fall. We're hoping to schedule October. So the fall grounds by Jens Jensen again. The beautiful estate will be open. There'll be programs. We'll show the film. That I know that will be our first in-person program, but we will continue to have other programs virtually. I believe for now, oh, and our website is being redone. Similarly to ICAA, you can look up benjaminmarshallsociety.org or just Benjamin Marshall Society, and it will lead you to it to show you what we have going forward. We're talking about a program in one of the most beautiful buildings Benjamin Marshall did on State Parkway. Fingers crossed if that happens. I think that's it. I'm very grateful to be part of this. Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Please enjoy this really wonderful program this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Just a quick note, if you have any questions, you can certainly click on the, not on the chat, please, but do it on the Q&A button in Zoom. It's a little easier for us to read. So if you're asking questions, hit the Q&A button instead of chat. Just makes it easier for us to answer the questions. You can always ask a question during the lecture if just something comes to you, but we're going to wait till the end of the lecture to answer any questions. Brief introduction. Many designers of the Deco era, including American muralist Hildreth Meière, often looked to the classical past for inspiration. During her 40-year career, the prolific and versatile Meière completed approximately 100 commissions, including the rondels of dance, drama, and song for the 50th Street facade of Radio City Music Hall, the interiors of the Nebraska State Capitol, and the whimsical bronze silhouette of Mercury and the Winds for the Logan Square Post Office here in Chicago. Kathleen Murphy Skolnick, co-author of the Art Deco Murals of Hildreth Meière, will acquaint you with this talented artist and her modern interpretations of classical themes. Kathleen teaches art and architectural history at Roosevelt University in Chicago and leads seminars on Art Deco design at the Newberry Library. She is the co-author of the Art Deco Murals of Hildreth Meière and a contributor to the recently published Art Deco Chicago, Designing Modern America. She was the editor of the Chicago Art Deco Society magazine and currently serves on the advisory board of the Art Deco Society of New York. Kathleen, take it away.
Thank you, Scott. And thanks to the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art for inviting me, and the Benjamin Marshall Society for inviting me to speak about Hildreth Meière and the classical roots of her Art Deco design. And thanks to all of you who are watching on Zoom. If we were in person, I would probably ask how many of you were familiar with Hildreth Meière before you read the description of tonight's lecture, because I'm always very curious about how many people are aware of her. If we were in person, I just ask you to raise your hands if you knew something about Hildreth Meière. But even in this remote format, I think we can communicate through the chat feature of Zoom. So I'm going to ask those of you who were familiar with Hildreth Meière before you heard about this lecture to just type yes in the chat box. And I'll give you a little time to do that. Those of you who don't know Meière, you can just sit back and I am going to access my images. We wait for those responses to come in. And in the meantime, you can look at this 1943 self-portrait of Hildreth Meière. Let's see how we're doing. Well, interestingly, my chat has disappeared.
I can still see it. What I see is about chat 9
About
people.
10?
About 10, yeah.
Okay.
Actually
about
9.
10 more seconds. Oh, I see. I think I'm up in this more chat. Here we
Yeah.
go. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay, so we've got about 10 to 12 people who were familiar with Hildreth Meière, and we have almost 80 people listening right now. So not a high percentage, and I'm not surprised about that because I don't think Hildreth Meière has been very well known, even among art and architectural historians. Although I hope that the book that Scott mentioned that I co-authored, the Art Deco Murals of Hildreth Meière, here's the cover, which was published in 2014, has helped to increase awareness of Hildreth Meière. But as I mentioned, I don't think she has been very well known, despite the fact that she was one of the most talented, prolific, and versatile American muralists of the first half of the 20th century. During her 40-year professional career, which extended from the early 1920s until her death in 1961, she completed approximately 100 commissions. She designed murals for office buildings, churches, government buildings, theaters, restaurants, cocktail lounges, ocean liners, and World's Fair pavilions. And she designed in a wide variety of mediums, including paint, ceramic tile, glass and marble mosaic, terracotta, leather, wood, metal, and stained glass. She was, as I mentioned, she was very versatile. Her designs ranged from this painted altarpiece, which was inspired by 14th century Sienese traditions. It is at St. I'm sorry, this is covering up St. Mark's. St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Mount Kisco, New York. She designed it in the 1920s. To these Renaissance portraits of the evangelists, here are two of them, Matthew and Luke. They were for the pendentives of the dome in St. Michael's Monastery Church in Union City, New Jersey. To this 19th century scene that Meière herself described as Currier and Ives with a somewhat Byzantine approach. It was for the lobby of the Travelers Insurance Company building in Hartford, Connecticut, and it's from the 1950s. But some of Meière's most striking murals, and the ones with which she is most identified, are her Art Deco designs, seen in the floor of the foyer at the Nebraska State Capitol in Lincoln. And we'll look at this design again a little bit later. Meière's designs were not referred to as Art Deco during her lifetime because that term was not introduced until the late 1960s. But it was derived from an event that had occurred several decades earlier. A decorative arts exposition held in Paris in 1925 called the International Exposition of Modern Decorative and Industrial Arts. And here's a poster from that exposition. And you can see from the poster that the French phrase for decorative arts is art décoratif, and that's where Art Deco comes from. It was introduced in the late 1960s in a book written by the British author and critic Bevis Hillier called Art Deco of the 20s and 30s. And this book really led to the widespread dissemination and adoption of this term, Art Deco. So what is Art Deco? That's a very difficult question to answer. There's no clear, simple, precise definition of Art Deco that I'm aware of. Its expression can vary widely. And for that reason, I think it may be best to consider Art Deco not as a specific style, but rather as an attitude, a spirit, a movement, or an approach to design. Its manifestations range from the faceted crown of New York's Chrysler Building on the left, to the simple streamlined forms of the former Coca-Cola bottling plant in Cincinnati, Ohio, seen on the right. From the tall enameled brass vase on the left, one of a pair by Jean Dunant, to the colorful bold ceramics of Clarice Cliff on the right. And from this exquisite lacquered radio cabinet on the left, which was also by Dunant. And if you look at the front of the cabinet, you'll notice a female figure there who looks very much like the toast of 1920s Paris, Josephine Baker. And on the right is a simple Bakelite radio manufactured by Crosley. One of the reasons for the great diversity in Art Deco design is the various design movements and artistic styles that led to its emergence. Art Deco was like a sponge, and it just soaked up elements of all of these different styles. Among the three most commonly cited is Cubism, with its angular fractured forms seen in the painting by Pablo Picasso on the left. And on the right, you see those fractured forms in this Cubist Art Deco clock by Jean de Gourdon. Another commonly cited influence is exoticism, which refers to a fascination with distant times and places. And here is Irish-born designer Eileen Gray's exquisite Pirogue or canoe daybed. The exterior is brown lacquer with a tortoise shell overlay, and the interior is silver gilt. And it's inspired by the dugout canoes of Micronesia, which you see on the lower right. And another example of exoticism, this Egyptian revival clock from Cartier in the form of a temple gate or pylon, like you see in the Temple of Horus at Edfu on the right. And the third most commonly cited influence on Art Deco is the Ballet Russe, with its colorful and opulent costume and set designs. And here on the left, you have Pablo Picasso's design for the Chinese conjurer's costume in the Ballet Parade. And on the right is a coat designed by Sonia Delaunay that was once worn by Gloria Swanson. So those are the three most commonly cited influences on Art Deco, but they're not the only ones. Others include Futurism, with this emphasis on motion and speed and technology and the modern world in general. And you see that reflected in this Art Deco travel poster. Russian constructivism, with its straight lines and orderly arrangements of geometric forms, seen in this carpet by the British designer Betty Joel. And even the 19th century Art Nouveau movement, with its curvilinear forms and its emphasis on nature, which you also see in one of my favorite murals, this jungle scene in cut linoleum by Pierre Bourdelle that's in the Cincinnati Union Terminal. And Cincinnati is my hometown, so I have a special connection with this mural. And many Art Deco designers also looked to the classical past. They took their inspiration from ancient Greece and Rome. And I want to show you a few examples. Here on the left is the Temple of Athena Nike on the Acropolis in Athens. It has these slender Ionic columns, which you also see on the Swedish Pavilion at the 1925 Paris Exposition on the lower right. Chariots and charioteers were a common motif in Greek vase painting. And you see some examples over on the left. And on the right is a cabinet designed by the French furniture designer Émile Jacques Rouman with a marble inlay of a charioteer motif. But in this case, it's a female charioteer. And her scarf is streaming out behind her as she holds the reins of their stylized horses. And another example on the left is Praxiteles' famous Aphrodite of Knidos. And on the right, a contemporary, at least for its time, interpretation of a classical nude in Jean Dupas' painting The Parakeets, which was in the house of a collector at the Paris Exposition. This was the Roman Pavilion. And just like many of these other artists, Hildreth Meière often combined Art Deco with classical traditions. But before we look at her designs, I wanted to give you some background about Hildreth Meière. She was born in 1892 in New York, in Flushing, Queens. And here's a very young Hildreth. Her mother was the former Marie Hildreth. So that's where Hildreth gets her rather unusual first name. It was her mother's maiden name. Marie, or Minnie as the family called her, had studied art in Paris and at the Art Students League of New York, but she put aside any thoughts of an artistic career in 1890 when she married Ernest Meière. Although after her marriage, she continued to paint for her own enjoyment, and she instilled a love of art in her two daughters, Hildreth, shown here with Minnie on the left, and her younger sister Lloyd on the right. In 1911, Hildreth graduated from the Academy of the Sacred Heart, the Catholic girls' boarding school in Manhattan that she attended. This is her graduation photo, and she is standing at the center of the back row. Here's Hildreth. By this time, she had decided that she wanted to be an artist. So soon after graduation, Minnie took her to Florence, where she spent a year studying with an English artist. This time in Florence had a great impact on the direction that her career would take. When she left New York, she was planning to be a portrait painter. But after seeing what she would later call the great, beautiful walls in Florence, meaning the Renaissance frescoes, she knew that she wanted to become a muralist. Hildreth Meière had a rather broad definition of a mural that went beyond the textbook definition of a painting on a wall. For Meière, a mural was more accurately described as a decoration. It didn't have to be painted. It could be executed in other mediums, like tile or mosaic. And it didn't have to be on a wall. It could be on a ceiling or a dome or even on the floor. When Hildreth returned from Europe, she continued her studies at the Art Students League of New York until her father's health led the family to move to San Francisco, where she studied at the California School of Fine Arts. How she got back to New York and started her career as a muralist is, I think, a very interesting story. Hildreth loved the performing arts, especially the theater and dance. When she attended these performances, she would carefully observe the actors and the dancers, make mental notes, and later she would turn these mental images into sketches. Here's a sketch that she did of the Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova, who appeared in San Francisco in the summer of 1915. And you can see that Anna Pavlova has signed this sketch. This is a later sketch of the Canadian-born actress Margaret Anglin, who in the summer of 1915, did I say 2015 before? I'm sorry if I did that. But in the summer of 1915, Anglin was appearing in Greek dramas at the Greek Theater in Berkeley. That summer, Hildreth took some of her sketches to a San Francisco framer to have them mounted. And it just so happened that a member of Anglin's company was in the same shop. She saw Hildreth's sketches, told Anglin about them. Anglin asked to meet her. And after seeing more of Hildreth's work, she asked her if she'd be willing to come to New York to design costumes and sets for a series of upcoming plays that Anglin was going to appear in. And that is how, in January of 1916, 23-year-old Hildreth Meière found herself traveling alone on a cross-country train from California to New York. She spent her first few nights in the convent associated with the school that she had attended, but within a few days, she had a room in a residence hotel, and she had some work. She had gone to see Livingston Platt, an artist who worked with Margaret Anglin, and Anglin had referred Hildreth to him, and he gave her an assignment right away. And during her first few years in New York, Hildreth worked consistently with Livingston Platt, although she also designed for some other, she also had commissions from other companies as well. These are costume designs for a Metropolitan Opera production of Canterbury Pilgrims. During World War I, Hildreth wanted to do something to help the war effort. She enlisted in the Navy, and she was assigned to the Brooklyn Navy Yard as an architectural draftsman. But her sights were always set on becoming a muralist, and after her honorary discharge from the Navy, she took steps to achieve this goal. She wanted to attend the Beaux-Arts Institute of Design in New York, but she couldn't because the Beaux-Arts Institute only accepted male students. So instead, she enrolled in the School of Applied Design for Women, where she was pleased to learn that although she couldn't attend the Beaux-Arts Institute, she could participate in the Institute's design competitions, which were open to students from other schools. These competitions were in the form of design problems formulated by New York architects, sometimes based on projects that they were working on. Hildreth excelled at these competitions. Here are two of her submissions, and you can see the notation on the one on the left says first medal. These competitions also led to two actual commissions. These are two of four painted panels with the theme of the Four Seasons that she painted for a breakfast room in a home on Park Avenue in New York. And this is a mural of Pan playing the pipes for the living room ceiling of a house on the Upper East Side. In 1921, Meière received an introduction to the New York architect Bertram Grosvenor Goodhue, who launched her career by giving her her first major mural commission, the decoration of the Great Hall at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. This is Goodhue's design for the National Academy, an example of modernized classicism. And this is Meière's design for the Great Hall. The decorative program for this space was developed by the Academy's building committee, and the theme was the history of science. At the center of the dome is the sun, surrounded by symbols of the 8 planets known at the time. And then by personifications of the sciences. Here on the left is chemistry, astronomy, and physics, and on the right, a detail of physics. And in the pendentives, which are these curved triangular sections at the base of the dome, are female personifications of the elements. This is a concept from classical Greece. It's my understanding that it was the Greek philosopher Empedocles who introduced this idea of 4 components of the universe, and Plato, who first used the word elements in Timaeus. And here you have water and fire, and air and earth. The medallions around the figures depict inventions related to each of the elements. So for example, around air, you have a bellows and a sail and a windmill. Meière's designs were originally going to be executed in glazed ceramic tile, but that proved to be too expensive. So Bertram Goodhue came up with an alternative, what he called a new medium. He had Meière's designs applied to the walls and ceilings of the Great Hall with gesso, a mixture of plaster and glue that artists used to prime their canvas. And it created a raised effect, like a low relief sculpture. And I think you can get a feeling for that 3-dimensionality in this decorative band from the Great Hall. For me, these designs by Meière are not Art Deco. They're more of a combination of Art Nouveau and Byzantine traditions, but she did incorporate some motifs that became very closely associated with Art Deco. And that includes the continuous chevrons, or that V-shaped pattern that you see in the hair streaming out behind air, and in the waves in the water medallion. Unfortunately, Bertram Goodhue never had the opportunity to see Meière's designs installed in the Great Hall because he died in April of 1924, just days before the dedication. But before he died, he had selected Meière to design the interiors of the Nebraska State Capitol in Lincoln. And in many of her designs here, she adopted a more definitive Art Deco approach. Here's the marble floor of the foyer that we saw earlier. The iconographic program for the decoration of the interior of the Capitol and for the exterior as well was developed by a University of Nebraska philosophy professor named Hartley Burr Alexander. And his concept for the foyer floor was a mythological interpretation of creation. At the entrance to the foyer is this rectangular panel. Here's Meiere's study for it, with this Zeus-like figure whom Alexander referred to as the genius of creative energy. He holds the reins of the cosmic forces as he travels through the universe, creating the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets. And beyond him is, or are, the spirit of the soil, representing the structure of the earth. Flora, the spirit of vegetation, giving life to the flowers and mushrooms around her. And fauna, the spirit of animal life, the guardian of the animals. At the end of the foyer, just before the entrance to the rotunda, is this rectangular panel with a winged figure whom Alexander called Eros, or the genius of vital energy. And he's sowing the seeds of flora, represented by the pine cones on the right, and fauna, represented by the butterflies on the left. This is Meiere's design for the rotunda floor. At the center is this Earth Mother figure. Alexander called her Terra Magna. She appears very often in classical art. Here's an example. This is a relief from the altar of Augustan peace, the Ara Pashas. And you see her holding these two babies on her lap. She's very often shown with a cornucopia as well. Meiere's Mother Earth is flanked by the water of life on the left, the bread of life on the right, and the breath of life at her feet. She's surrounded by these medallions with male personifications of the elements, and they're all joined by this giant eloge, this continuous curvilinear band. And in the borders around the figures are prehistoric life forms found in Nebraska that are related to each element. So for example, around air, you have birds and butterflies and flying reptiles. Off of the rotunda is the entrance to what was originally intended to be the Senate, or rather the Senate chamber. But during construction of the Nebraska state capitol, Nebraska went unicameral, and this space was used for the single legislative body. The scene, oops, I've got the wrong one here. This is the entrance to the House chamber, I'm sorry. And here we have a scene from ancient Greece. On the left is Athena, she's leaning against the Acropolis. And on the right, the serpentine form of the Greek king Erechtheus. And this is a reference to Athenian democracy. This is the panel at the entrance to the Senate chamber. When Nebraska went unicameral, the Senate chamber was used for other purposes. And you see it's a scene of the Capitoline Hill with Jove. So this is a reference to the Roman Republic. In the glazed ceramic dome of the rotunda are the 8 virtues of the state. These winged female figures wearing helmets, perhaps inspired by Athena. Here on the left is a reconstruction of Phidias's colossal statue of Athena for the Parthenon. Or perhaps they were inspired by the Caryatids on the Porch of the Maidens on the Erechtheion. You can see that the vertical folds in their gowns are similar to the folds in the gowns of the Caryatids, and they also resemble the fluting that you see in classical columns. They hold hands, signifying their mutual support, and the name of each of the virtues is indicated on the pedestals. Meière's early work for the National Academy of Sciences and the Nebraska State Capitol established her reputation as a muralist. It earned her the Borkett, Nebraska earned her the gold medal in mural painting from the Architectural League of New York, and led to many, many other commissions. And in several of these commissions, she blended classical themes with Art Deco motifs. As in the terracotta floor that she designed for the pool in the communications court at Northerly Island at the Century of Progress. This is the communications court. Here is Meière's pool. And here's her design. It's entitled The Spirits of Communication, and it shows these classically inspired male and female figures racing around the globe, weaving a network of telephone and telegraph wires to unite the world in communication. In the border around the figures, this is difficult to see, but there are the names of the communication companies that had displays in the communications hall. Meière also adopted a classical theme for this metal sculpture that was placed over the entrance to the Science and Education Building at the 1939 New York World's Fair. It's entitled Hippocrates, the Father of Medicine, and the Dragon of Ignorance. And you see the dragon cowering on the left as Hippocrates holds up the lamp of knowledge. During the Depression, Meière received a commission through the Treasury Department section of Painting and Sculpture, a mural for, this was one of the New Deal programs that was established to help artists during this challenging time. It was for the Logan Square Post Office in Chicago, which you see here. A whimsical bronze silhouette sculpture entitled The Post. It shows the Roman messenger god Mercury, flanked by the winds, guiding a letter on its journey. It's above the doorway between the post office lobby and the customer service area. So it's easy to overlook because when you enter the service area, it's behind you. So you have to turn around and look up, or look up as you're leaving that area and you'll see it. Meière also incorporated classical references in some of her corporate designs. Her first corporate commission was a marble floor for the banking hall of the Baltimore Trust Company in downtown Baltimore, Maryland. The theme was modern Baltimore and its thriving economy. Although by the time the building opened in December of 1939, the stock market crash had occurred and the economy wasn't so thriving anymore. Within a year, Baltimore Trust would have to vacate the building and eventually declared bankruptcy. Meière's floor is made up of 7 panels. 3 of them are totally geometric patterns like the one that you see here, and the other 4 are figurative. This is the Baltimore Harbor, a maiden from the classical past kneeling on the shore and guiding the ships safely to the piers. And behind her, you see the skyline of downtown Baltimore, and here's the Baltimore Trust Company building, which was the tallest tallest building in the city when it was completed. This is Baltimore Industry with these 4 classical figures surrounding a globe. They represent courage, cooperation, vision, and industry. This is the Baltimore Rail Center, looking like a Roman matron wearing this winged helmet, resting her arm on a locomotive wheel and holding a stretch of railroad track. And one of my favorites, the Baltimore Airport. This woman wearing a flowing classical garment that she's accessorized with an aviator's cap and goggles. And in the background, you see the control tower and the planes. The Baltimore Trust Company building is now a condominium. It's called 10 Light Street. The banking hall has been converted to an Armor All Fitness Center. The floor, the marble floor, is covered, which protects it, but you can't see Meière's designs here anymore. Hopefully sometime in the future, they'll have a new tenant here and they'll be able to uncover the floor. Meière's design for the lobby of the AT&T building in the Chelsea neighborhood of New York was a collaboration with Ralph Walker, who was the design partner in the firm of Voorhees, Gamelin and Walker. And Walker designed many Art Deco skyscrapers in Manhattan. Her original theme for the mural on the lobby ceiling didn't have any classical connections. The theme was a day in the life of a telephone girl. As telephone communications expanded, many women were taking jobs as telephone operators. And these telephone girls, as they were known, were becoming popular cultural icons. In 1931, Meière exhibited a full-scale study of her proposed mural at an exhibition sponsored by the Architectural League of New York. And at that time, this photo appeared in the New York Evening Post. As far as I know, it's the only image that exists of her original proposal because it was never executed. This photo, I scanned this photo from a old newspaper clipping, so that's why it's so grainy. The mural showed a young woman waking up, having her morning coffee, getting dressed, and going to her job as a telephone operator. The AT&T executives were not so pleased with this concept. As Meière later wrote, they shied away from the bedroom scene and they thought that it looked a little bit too much like a comic strip. They wanted something more traditional with allegorical figures. So Meière, always ready to please her clients, came up with a new theme: the continents linked by telephone and wireless. And she did include allegorical figures, but they're not those monumental females representing virtues and qualities like justice and charity that you see in late 19th and early 20th century murals. In Meière's hands, these figures are fresh and modern. At the center of the ceiling are two classically inspired females, and there's a condor hovering over the one in the foreground, and there's an eagle over the one behind her. And they grasp these gold lines signifying wires that extend diagonally to personifications of 4 continents at the periphery of the ceiling. Here's Australia on the left, leaning her arm on a sheep and holding some sheaves of wheat, with a kangaroo looking out at us. On the right is Asia wearing a kimono. She's accompanied by an elephant and a tiger, and there are pagodas in the background. Here on the left, you have Africa holding a fan. She's with 2 exotic lions, and she's gesturing toward the pyramids. And on the right is Europe, holding an orb and a scepter. She's leaning on a column with an Ionic capital. And in the background, you see a Roman aqueduct, the Dome of St. Peter's, and the towers of Notre Dame. The mural at the AT&T building gave Meière an opportunity to experiment with a new medium, silhouette mosaic. In silhouette mosaic, the glass tiles, or the tesserae, are used for outlines and details, and the spaces in between are filled with color cement or plaster. Silhouette mosaic is much more economical than solid mosaic, and this was an important consideration in buildings being constructed during the Depression. Perhaps Meière's best known murals, or at least the ones seen by the largest number of people each day, are the mixed metal and enamel roundels or circular sculptures that she designed for the 50th Street facade of Radio City Music Hall in New York, representing Song, who looks like she might have stepped out of a red figure painting, like the ones on the Greek drinking cup from the 5th century BCE on the right. Drama, who may have been inspired by Athena. We saw Phidias's sculpture earlier, or maybe by an Amazonian warrior, whom you see on these Greek amphoras. The one at the bottom is the queen of the Amazons, who's about to be slain. And dance, with this red-haired siren wearing only ballet shoes and playing the cymbals, and she's cavorting with a Roman soldier who looks very much like the ones on Trajan's column on the right. Meière designed another metal and enamel sculpture for Rockefeller Center. It was on the 49th Street facade of the RKO Center Theater. Here you see it in place. Here's one of Meiere's studies for the sculpture entitled Radio and Television Encompassing the Earth. It measured 18 feet by 35 feet. That's twice the width of one of the roundels. And it shows this powerful male figure kneeling at the center with his arms flung out, transmitting waves of electrical energy through radio and television, symbolized by the medallions held by the two female figures to either side. The sculpture was lost when the theater was demolished in 1954, but there is a smaller reproduction of Meiere's design executed by a contemporary artist that is located in the subway concourse near Rockefeller Center. Meiere's final corporate commission was a 3-panel marble mosaic mural for the lobby of Prudential Plaza, the headquarters of the Prudential Insurance Company in Newark, New Jersey. And here again, she provides an Art Deco interpretation of a classical theme. Prudential's motto is strong as the Rock of Gibraltar, and the rock is their corporate symbol. So what better subject for her mural than an event from the 10th labor of Hercules, in which he uses his superhuman strength to break through the mountain range separating the Western Mediterranean from the Atlantic Ocean, creating the Strait of Gibraltar. Here's a detail from the central panel showing Hercules in a dolphin-shaped boat with dolphins leaping around him as he sails through the Strait of Gibraltar. And here on the left, on this Greek kylix or drinking cup from the 5th century BCE by the potter and painter Ezekiel, you see not Hercules, but Dionysus in a similar shaped boat. The side panels represent the coasts of North Africa and Spain, which are known as the Pillars of Hercules. In the 1990s, the lobby of Prudential Plaza was modernized, and the mural was removed, put into storage, and pretty much forgotten about. Later, Hildreth Meiere's granddaughter, Hildreth Meière Dunn, or Hilly Dunn, was traveling throughout the country taking photographs of her grandmother's work. When she went to Newark, she found that the mural was gone. But she learned what happened to it, and she also learned that Prudential was planning to sell the garage where it was being stored and would be willing to donate the mural to an institution or organization that would be interested in having it. But first, the mural had to be restored. It was severely damaged during the removal process, and here you see the damage that was done to one of the side panels. Here are the mosaicists, Steve Miotto over here on the left, and Tony Schiavo over on the right, repairing the damage. And interestingly, as a young man, Tony Schiavo, shown here in this historic photograph, here's Tony, worked on executing the original mural. And here is Hildreth Meière inspecting it. Today, the central panel is in the collection of the Newark Museum in Newark, New Jersey. The side panels are at Harvard University's Center for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C. They're installed back to back, and one of the murals is in the library, which you see here. See it restored now. And the other one is in the courtyard. As I mentioned earlier, Meière was very versatile. She designed in a variety of styles. So I wanted to show you a few more examples of her work, one in New York and the others in Chicago, that do not show a classical influence. I wanted to show you the one in New York because it is so stunning. This is the client reception room, also known as the Red Room. in what was originally the Irving Trust Company building at 1 Wall Street in New York, with the walls and ceiling covered with shimmering glass mosaic. The jagged pattern was designed by Perry Coke Smith, who at the time was an assistant designer with Voorhees, Gamelin, and Walker, the firm that designed the building. Meière was the consultant on scale and color, which ranges from a deep red at the base to a brilliant gold and orange on the ceiling. This later became the Bank of New York Mellon, which then sold it to a developer who is converting 1 Wall Street to a condominium. And the plan, from what I've heard, is to make the Red Room a high-end retail space. They haven't released the name of the client yet. The other designs are in Chicago because the 2 organizations hosting this lecture are based in Chicago. And so I wanted to make you aware of Meière's other projects in the city. Earlier, we saw the bronze silhouette sculpture in the Logan Square Post Office, and we saw the terracotta pool that she did for the Century of Progress. Meière also designed a mural for the exhibition of the National Council of Women at the Century of Progress. Here you see the mural in place. Here are Meière's studies for it. The title is The Progress of Women Through Organization, 1833 to 1933. It's made up of 3 panels divided into 10 sections, each representing a decade. And within each decade, Meière represented important struggles and achievements of women during that time period. The women of 1833, here on the far left, were limited to the narrow confines of the home. But with time, they step over the threshold, acquire an education. They campaign for temperance, comfort the slaves, care for the wounded on the battlefields of the Civil War. Susan B. Anthony, wearing her red shawl, campaigns for women's suffrage. Women's organizations are formed. Women march for the vote. They enter the business and professional world, and they lobby for world peace. And at the end, Cleo, the muse of history, records it all on a stone tablet. The women of 1833 are depicted against a background of closely spaced iron bars. But as time goes on, those bars widen, and eventually they disappear. After the exhibition ended, the National Council of Women donated the mural to Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. Over the years, the first 2 panels were lost, but the 3rd panel, which represents the years 1903 to 1933, does still exist today, and it's in the collection of the Smith College Museum of Art. Meière designed ceramic tile decorations for the vault and the ribs and the ceiling of the apse of the Rockefeller Memorial Chapel on the campus of the University of Chicago. Rockefeller Chapel was designed by Bertram Goodhue. It opened in 1918. Remember that Bertram Goodhue designed the National Academy of Sciences and the Nebraska State Capitol that we saw earlier. He died in 1924, and after his death, Meière worked with his successor firm to complete the interiors of the chapel. The theme of her decorations was St. Francis of Assisi's Canticle of the Creatures. And the medallions that she designed for the ceiling of the apse symbolize the earthly and the heavenly realms. Here you have some of the heavenly medallions, angels playing cymbals, a drum, and pipes. And below, the earthly realm with the moon and water and plants. The black and white chevron bands on the ribs of the vault resemble Sioux quill work or beadwork. And you find these patterns in some of Meière's other designs as well. her smallest commission is also located in Chicago. It's this altarpiece, which she painted, and the wall behind it. And for those of you watching who live in Chicago, I suspect that most, if not all of you, have seen this, but you may not recognize it in this context, but this should help. This is Our Lady, Queen of Angels. This is the Gothic church in the Thorne miniature rooms at the Art Institute of Chicago. Hildreth Meière and Narcissa Thorne were friends, and Mrs. James Ward Thorne asked her if she would help with the decoration of the church. The final work that I want to show you goes back to the classical traditions again, combining classicism and Art Deco. This nude with her hair streaming out behind her. This is a study for an unexecuted project, and there's nothing on the back of this study to indicate what it was designed for. However, it is very similar to this design. This is a drawing that's in the collection of the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York. And this does have a notation on the back indicating that it was a design for an etched glass panel for the communication hall at the Century of Progress. And again, it was never executed, but there are similarities between the two, which leads me to believe that this design was also intended for the communication hall. So it was originally intended for Chicago, and it is located in Chicago today. Here's where it is today. Not a very great image because the photographer is not very professional. You can even see her outline as she aims the camera. But I'm the photographer, and this happens to be on the wall of my living room. And it's beautifully framed. It was framed by Louise Meière Dunn, who is Meière's daughter. She had a framing business. She also wrote a very well-known book on framing. So thank you all for listening tonight. I hope that those of you who knew nothing about Meière before this lecture have been acquainted with her work. And for those of you who did know something about Meière, I hope this lecture has increased your awareness and appreciation of her design. So I think we have some time for questions, Scott.
Yes, wonderful presentation, Kathleen. That was really
Thank you.
Remarkable. What a breadth of work. I mean, fantastic.
I forgot one thing. I'm sorry. When you mentioned her breadth of work, just one more thing. If you would like to see more of her designs, because I've only showed you a fraction of them tonight, you can go to the website of the International Hildreth Meière Association, hildrethmeière.org, and her commissions are classified by location, by theme, by building type. And if you're at all interested in getting the book, you can also order it from IHMA. So thank you again. Sorry about that, Scott.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Couple of quick questions off the top here. This one came in a while ago. Where is the Spirits of Communication medallion now?
Lost.
Lost.
You know, after the one in the terracotta pool, when these fairs end, for the most part, everything is just demolished. I mean, it's lucky that we have that panel from the mural that she did for the Century of Progress. But most of I think everything. She did like maybe 11 projects for the New York World's Fair, and they're all gone. There are some models of that sculpture that I showed of Hippocrates and the Dragon of Ignorance. There's a model of some of those figures, and there's a little model that she did out of it's like aluminum foil. But most of them are lost.
Oh, that's a shame. That's a shame. One thing, another question that came in early on was, can you speak to the prevalence of women in the iconography of Art Deco? The classical charioteers became women. The personification of nature was associated with women.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What maybe speak to that a little
Women
bit.
were commonly seen in Art Deco designs. And they were also, before that, in Art Nouveau design. So, and Art Nouveau, sometimes Art Deco is looked on as the antithesis of Art Nouveau, but actually they had a lot in common. And there are a lot of features that Art Deco borrowed from Art Nouveau. And I think the female figures may be one of them. But you do see women, often classically inspired women or nymphs in Art Deco designs.
Do you think it was
and sometimes very elegantly clad women as well.
Do you think it was of the time, that era, women were becoming, you know, more prevalent in the art world, or just, you know, we're talking about
well, they were entering the art world. I'm not sure how prominent they were, but women were advancing. And this was also a time when women were very stylish. And I think that was part of the Art Deco aesthetic.
Right. Well, after the Depression, right? Or around that time. Yeah.
And even before in the 20s,
Before
late 20s.
the 20s, that's true, the 20s, yeah. This, I'm not sure what this is referring to. If you might, it says, what difference is this building? And that must have been like, 45 minutes into your presentation, between this building and the 1970s AT&T Long Lines building just up the street, and known these days as the Spy Scraper. I don't know if that, I don't know which building he's referring to.
Ooh, the building is probably the AT&T long distance building.
Yeah.
This I'm not sure what building they're referring to. This building is on 6th Avenue. It's between Walker and Lispenard. In fact, it was originally called the Walker Lispenard building, and it was originally constructed in the early part of the 20th century, and then it was essentially totally remodeled by Ralph Walker. But that's where it's located. So I don't know if that's the same building they're referring to or not. But Walker did so many buildings for telephone companies, and there are a number of them in the Chelsea area and Lower Manhattan. So, but I'm not sure what building you're referring to.
And then any more details you can give on her personal life?
Her personal life. She worked and worked and worked. So at one time she was asked about her personal life by a reporter, and she said, "I hardly have time for my personal life." She did get married, and her husband was from Austria, but the marriage did not last very long. And it lasted long enough that they did have a child. And she always referred to herself as Mrs. Meière. So she went back to her maiden name. I'm not sure if she ever adopted her husband's name. They weren't married for all that long, but she went back to her maiden name, but she was referred to as Mrs. Meière. And she was very sociable. She was a member of the Architectural League of New York when they allowed women to join. And there's one photo of her. The Architectural League had a costume party, and she dressed as Madame X, as Sargent's photo. She looks painting, and she looks very, very elegant. There is another image in which they had some sort of an event, and she appears riding a horse, which was actually a horse made of, two men in a costume, and she was sitting on top. So she seemed she worked very, very hard, but she seemed to have a lot of fun. And every summer, just about every summer, she would travel to Europe. So she traveled a great deal, and she got her inspiration from her travels as well. She talks about being at, I think it was the Florence Cathedral, and looking at the floor and thinking about Nebraska.
Great, wonderful. Here's another question from Vivian Borek. If the term Art Deco wasn't used until the 1960s, how did artists and art aficionados refer to these works during their creation?
Initially, it was referred to as modernistic. It was referred to as modern, or it was the zigzag, or the skyscraper, or the vertical style, or art moderne. So those were several descriptions that were used.
And then
But
she followed up with,
modernistic was very common.
I see, what did she follow it up with? Was Meière discovered in France? Or I'm not sure what she means by that, but.
Um, no, well, in terms of being discovered, I would say she was discovered by Bertram Goodhue, who really, I mean, she had little professional experience. She had done the projects through the competitions, the Beaux-Arts Institute of Design competitions, but she had never really had a commission, a major commission like the National Academy of Sciences. I mean, it's almost unheard of that she would be hired to design this incredible space with the little experience she had. So I think he really launched her career and recognized her talent.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, any more? I think we're all set. I think that's all the questions we have for today. So,
Well,
wonderful.
thank you so much for inviting me to speak again, and for everyone for listening. And
you.
do go to the website because there's so much information and so many wonderful photos and photos of Meière and photos of her work and studies. And you can get a lot more information about her from the website.
Thank you. Wonderful,
Okay, well,
wonderful
thank you.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. And thank you
Bye-bye.
from the ICAA and the Benjamin Marshall Society. Thanks.